Using direct mail to generate motivated seller leads has been something that's been around for a very long time, probably longer than I've been alive. And the question is, like, has it changed at all? Like, it's just a postcard that goes into a mailbox, and then the seller either calls it or trashes it, right? And there's been some techniques of like, well, should we do like handwritten letters or like different colored envelopes and just different style of postcards and stuff like that? That's really about as far as the innovation has gone. But what if we're talking about like the data itself and who you're mailing to? Can that get better over time? And can that be more efficient, decrease your cost of the lead, bring in more leads, and make you close more percentage of those deals? I think this is something that a lot of people really don't talk about. They're just wanting to blanket an entire area geographically of mail pieces and then cross their fingers hoping that somebody's going to call them. What if there's a different motivation? What if somebody is in a vacant house that you're mailing to today, but the house has been vacant for a year versus a month? You're talking to two different people because the motivation level is completely separate. So in today's episode, we have my good friend Rob Swanson, CEO and owner of FreedomSoft. And we're talking about how he has been able to develop a mind-blowing system that he talks about on the show of how he's been able to leverage direct mail and decrease, like I said, the lead cost, up the leads, and make it more efficient in terms of the volume of deals that you're closing from those leads that are coming in. But he does that with data. It's not just like all these little trinkets and things that you change with direct mail. It's all about the data. It's the data that's being brought in, how it's being used in order to be able to hit them at the right motivations, hit your leads at the right motivation points, where they're at in their motivation, the type of motivation, all that stuff. And Rob really breaks it down to a science. He's one of the most intelligent people I've met when it comes to data and how it's being able to be broken down. So you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this. Rob's been in the real estate investing space for 25 plus years, almost as long as I've been alive, has flipped and done over like hundreds of deals. I don't know the exact number, but hundreds and hundreds of deals. He's been in the real estate investing space for a very long time, works with a lot of people that are personal friends of mine that are big dogs in the real estate investing space. So you're going to get a lot of value out of this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Make sure you take notes. If you are doing direct mail, you're going to get a lot of value out of this. If you're not doing direct mail, it's definitely something you want to consider going back into or start up. And this is going to be a great episode to kind of set a great foundation for you going into it. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Take some notes. Welcome back to the REI Marketing Weekly. I'm your host, Josh Culler. And today I have my very good friend, Rob Swanson, on the line. Rob, what's going on, man? Hailing from Colorado.
Fantastic. We are starting to get cooler weather here, and it feels pretty doggone good.
Yeah, it's 50s today here in sunny Chicago. But it feels like it's like 65 or 70 because of the sun. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I am super excited to have you on the show, man. I don't think I've ever had you on my podcast before. I know we've done lots of collaborative content before. I've had the pleasure of working with you for a couple of years in the past, and one of the things that I'm really excited to talk about with you today is, well, first of all, FreedomSoft is your baby that you have there. So we'll talk about that a little bit and how real estate investors can leverage that to generate motivated seller leads and use it as follow-up campaigns and stuff like that. We'll talk about all the features. But one of the things that you guys have really worked on recently is kind of honing in a little bit more of a different sequence type for direct mail, which I'm really highly interested in because we've had people on the show, obviously, like very, very many real estate investors do direct mail, but doing it strategically, it's kind of one of those things that's never really changed in a way. Like people have their set sequences. They have like when they're mailing out, depending on the motivation, depending on, the demographics that they're or the geographical locations that they're mailing to and that sort of thing. So obviously I kind of, direct mail sometimes been around for a very, very long time. So it's not like it innovates much per se. So I'm really excited to talk about this with you, but let's go ahead and dive in. So some of the things that you're working on with direct mail, I want to talk about that, dive in. You were kind of briefly explaining it to me, and I'd love to hear what you got going on.
Yeah. So, I think anything that's been around for a long time, you can still innovate on if you try, right? A lot of times the reason things don't get innovated is because nobody stops and says, hey, this thing that we've been doing for 20 years successfully,
Yeah.
With new technology, new opportunities, new availability, is there a better way to do it? And until somebody stops and says, let's think this through, innovation kind of is forgotten. And so we a couple of years ago started to lean in on that. And from a marketing and lead generation standpoint, I've been doing this for over 20 years. And the thing that I've always gone back to, and I think this is important to say, I've been on every bandwagon and train and marketing, fancy bell and whistle that has come and gone. And I've done them all. And the one thing that I always go back to is direct mail. And it's proven, it works, it's relatively simple. Once you figure it out, it's not expensive. And so all of these things. So we stopped one day and said, okay, this was in 2022, I think. And we knew that text message marketing, which had been the Wild West of lead generation, penny leads, super cheap, really fast, really easy. We knew it was going the way of, whatever, the extinction dinosaur. And mostly because of legislation and mostly because of the risk that it imposed if people wanted to sort of still do it. And so we said, well, what would be the replacement of that for people? And we said, well, for 25 years, direct mail has still been a piece of our business. It's always been a consistent backbone. So how do we try to make it better? And when I think about lead generation and marketing, I think of a couple of things. I think about focused messaging. I think about tracking, and I think about the follow-up. So in lead gen, there's the kind of front-end automations. There's that middle of funnel lead management, and then there's the back-end nurture. And what you always want to do is you want to get the highest quality lead you can for the lowest cost. And to sort of set up the traditional direct mail approach is you end up taking these lists. Let's say maybe it's a vacant house list, and then it's a tired landlord list, and then it's a high equity list, and it's these different lists that have different motivating drivers on their reason to sell. And they end up getting all sort of smashed together in order to get a large enough mailer campaign that gets your cost per mail piece down. And so going too broad with too generic of a message is the thing, Josh. It is the thing that makes most direct mail not work. And here's what happens. And I've seen this for years, especially being in the CRM software business. Somebody comes in and says, okay, I'm not doing SMS texting anymore. What do I do? Let me try direct mail. So they go build a small little list, maybe 1,000 records, 2,500 records, 5,000 records, a small little list with one type of motivation, and they send one message, and they get decent results. And then they say, wow, that was so good. If I can do that with a list of 1,000 records and get 20 leads and close a deal, what if I sent to 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000? I'm going to kill it. Well, in order to get a list that big, you end up having to piece multiple different motivation lists together. And then you end up watering down and make the messaging generic. And all of a sudden your lead conversion goes through the floor and your lead costs is skyrocketing. And you say, why doesn't direct mail work?
That's interesting. So you're saying, Rob, that sending a direct mail piece that has any motivation, you sell your house now, cash offer, as is, like all the bells and whistles, doesn't typically work.
It gets you a lower conversion rate than if you speak directly to the motivation.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that that's the problem that people end up going down, right? They test it and it works because when they test it, they test small, narrow with a singular message. And then they want to scale it. And they don't understand that to scale it, what you should do is instead of scaling one list to 10,000 with one message, you should scale 10 1,000 record lists with 10 different messages. Now, the problem that people run into is that becomes cumbersome. It becomes challenging to manage. It becomes overwhelming. And so people are like, forget it. And so that was the premise behind us saying, well, can we change the approach to direct mail? We know what works. We know what gets the highest lead conversion. Can we change people's fundamental ability to do direct mail better?
Yeah.
And so that was where sequence-based direct mail came in, where inside of our platform, what we started to build out was, instead of event-based marketing, which is on Monday, the 1st of the month, I'm going to send direct mail. And then on Wednesday, the 15th of the month, I'm going to send direct mail. We just said, build out your sequences, kind of like an email autoresponder, where today, mailer number 1 gets sent and it's a postcard. Next week, mailer number 2 gets sent and it's a letter. Then delay a month. Next month, a new postcard gets sent, and then a letter, and then a postcard, and then a postcard, and then a letter. So you can build out sequences that speak to the person that is going through the situation over the life cycle of the situation. And instead of event-based marketing, you simply add your records or add your list onto the sequence, and it just drips like an email autoresponder. So it's a pretty cool system, and it's been really fun to see people that kind of shunned direct mail come back to the party and say, oh, wait a minute, this is actually working.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think that's super, the best way I can kind of like sum that up is it's super intentional direct marketing or direct mail marketing, right? It's like, instead of just sending out, like I made the little subtle joke of like having a list of like all the things that you can do, all the motivations that you can help, and sending that out instead of speaking to trying to speak to everybody versus like one specific type of person and motivation. And I do think that, obviously you and I, have good marketing minds. You're one of the most intelligent people that I've met when it comes to marketing, especially in like the data world. That typically the people that do the hardest things, like you had mentioned, most people will come to that strategy and think like, oh, this is too much work. This is like, people that are willing to do that kind of stuff are typically the ones that are going to find those deals and consistently. And maybe, and again, like if you kind of boil it down, like how many deals do you really need to do? You just up that number of the amount of postcards that you need to send, because you already know the data of like how many calls you're going to get. But you can get really, really tight and specific on the demographic, and kind of, and I'm going to lead this to a question. In the marketing world, the more specific you are in your messaging, you might have a smaller pool of people. This is what Rob's trying to speak on. You're going to have a smaller pool of people if you go super niche, but if you go super niche, you're going to make a deeper impact. It's the conversation of going deeper versus wider. There's two types of strategies. Wider is a little bit more vulnerable because it's a bigger lay of the land that you really have to kind of strategize and work, versus you're just driving deep in one specific pinpoint. So I want to lay a foundation there and go even further back on the strategy of what you guys are doing. I want you to speak on, why is it so important? Because you were talking about it's important, but I want to know why it's important to go so specific and niche with a certain motivation and speak directly to that motivation and that person that, they're going through that issue or whatever the motivation is for the seller.
Yeah, because a great question. Because marketing and successful marketing always comes down to this. Successful marketing comes down to understanding the problem that somebody is dealing with, the pain they're feeling because of it, speaking specifically to a solution, and then giving them a call to action a step that they can take towards solving that problem. Yeah. And the more specific you can say, I'll give you an example. So some of the sequences that we have built in FreedomSoft, the direct mail sequences. We have, let's say, a multi-step vacant house sequence. And a multi-step vacant house sequence is specifically talking to the problems and the pain, and this is key, the pain of someone that owns a vacant house. So the problem is they have a vacant house, but the pain that they feel because of the vacant house is what gets people to take an action. And then
because they already know they have a vacant house. Like, they know who they are.
That's right.
And they feel like nobody knows what they're going through. Exactly. But when you do, because you stated it clearly to them, that's opening, like, you getting the way I look at it is you getting the piece to them is stepping to their door, and then addressing the pain point specifically is opening the door.
That's right.
So
and so take that even to the next level now. Let's just use this vacant house scenario. And on day one, you go in, Josh, and you build a list, and you build a list of vacant houses. And you're going to send direct mail to them. And if you think about what's happening, let's say that you just start today and you send your first mailer to the list of vacant houses. Let's say a week from now, there's 5, 10, 25 new vacant houses in a particular area. Well, when those houses first hit the vacant list, there is an experience that seller or that owner of the house is going through in that moment, the minute it goes vacant. A week later, their experience changes a little bit. A month later, their experience changes a little bit. 2 months later, their experience changes a little bit. And so if you can build sequence-based direct mail that the minute a house goes vacant, you automatically catch it in your list, you add it to the direct mail sequence, and direct mail goes out on day one, right when it goes vacant. Then you can design your sequence to speak to them on the most probable experience that they're having over time.
Wow.
That's how you skyrocket your conversion rates with direct mail.
Interrupting this podcast episode to tell you guys that this podcast is managed and produced by Color Media Productions. Yes, shameless plug, that's my company. However, we do this for a lot of other people as well. Most people that we work with are in the real estate investing space. So if you're listening to this podcast specifically, you probably are a real estate investor, given it's called the REI Marketing Weekly. If you're somebody that either wants to start a podcast or you have one going and it's becoming a little bit of a hassle, you're looking to transition to somebody that works a little bit better with a fluid motion in terms of you get the recordings done and then they do everything else. Well, that's what we do. We do fully managed podcasts from start to finish, video, audio, show noting, the graphics, publishing, everything that goes into it. It's a full service business that we run here in a service for you as a real estate investor if you are running a podcast. Additionally, we also do social media and YouTube management as well. So all of that being on the organic side, if you are interested in learning more about working with us and just recording content with guidance and strategy set by myself personally, and then not doing anything else after that, where we're taking care of everything from start to finish, then make sure you go check us out at colormedia.com, CULLER media.com. Hit us up there and we can learn more about working together, hop on a phone call and see what we could do for you. Now back to the episode. That is awesome. Yeah, and I don't really know anybody that's doing that. You know, that's clever and ingenious because, you know, they're probably already getting a lot of direct mail pieces by this point because they're going to be on these lists. Yep. And the way that you can stick out is by speaking to them directly along the journey. It's that customer journey that we always talk about in marketing, and marketing 101 is customer journey. Nail that down. But this is where I always go back, Rob, is because it, you know, in marketing, and you just said, like, why is it important? Marketing. One of the things that people don't think about, but that I try to drive home, especially in the content world, you know, I'm in the content world, social media, YouTube podcasts. One of the most important things that you really have to drive home with people is you really need to know your demographic almost better than they know themselves. Yep. You need to know what they're going through. And this is exactly what you're talking about. Every stage of that, if you're not an experienced real estate investor and you've never kind of like worked the system like this, it is going to be a challenge. But this is where, like, listening with 2 ears is super important as you're talking to your prospects and your leads and working deals and that sort of thing. You're talking to the sellers. You really need to listen, because you can hone in on this data that doesn't end up on a website or a page. You could hear these things that they're going through and really document that along the journey. So like as that positioning is changing in the motivation, how much, or maybe you can give examples, how much are you changing the messaging in between those sequences?
Yeah. So,
and you could give an example of like, again, the vacant house, like you can go through what that would look like.
Yeah, exactly. So in the vacant house list building process, we know if this house was not on the vacant house list last month and it is on the vacant house this month, it went from being occupied to being vacant. Oh. And so something happened in that period of transition, right? We can also then look in the database and say, well, is it listed for rent? So it was occupied last month, it's vacant this month, and
now they're trying to put somebody in the house again.
Yeah, they're trying to do something. So we can know that by looking at the data. So now you can take even a vacant house list and you can split the sequence that you're speaking to. The house that was vacant last month and vacant the month before and vacant a year ago is a different message than the house that was occupied last month and is currently listed for rent. And now we can speak to the specific situation. Like, people miss the mark on this stuff. They think, oh, I've got my vacant house list and I'm going to send a postcard or a mailer to the vacant house list. Well, that vacant house list probably has 3 different, highways that you could run down to speak to that specific situation. So that's a good example of how we do it. And then over time, we'll watch it. And, if it's been vacant for a year, that's a different messaging. If it was vacant last month and for rent right now and for rent next month, but then it's not for rent, but it's still vacant, we can specifically say, hey, we noticed your house was vacant and now, or for rent, and now it's not, but it still appears vacant. We can speak to what's likely happening in that scenario. And this is tying data, which we have built in FreedomSoft, to the automated direct mail system. So with our list automator, you turn that on, and the list automator is looking for these triggering events, and then it's saying, does a record meet a certain triggering event? And what it does is it will take it in and out of different mail sequences and talk based on the specific thing.
That's amazing. So I want to clarify something too, because I think a lot of this is where kind of like the deviation will happen with a lot of people, is that they'll start their direct mail campaign. And again, you use the example, if the house is vacant for a year, once you started running that list, versus if it was vacant for a month, they're in a different place in the journey. So what most people will do is send that direct mail campaign, and it's generalized to whether the vacancy was for a month or a year. It's very general. Like, it's not pinpointing the specific time period that it was, but the sequences you guys are building out are according to the motivation and the time and place of that specific lead that is through the door. And I want you to talk about how powerful that can be. So like, is that, because that time period, we talked about like the motivation and it's different. Is that literally what it sums up to, is like the motivation leverage is just different depending on the time? Because obviously if house has been vacant for a year versus a month, they're probably in the stage of like highly motivated, but kind of lost hope because it's been a year.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is that?
It's hugely important. It's hugely important because it goes back again to marketing success is about increasing conversion rate. So you want to speak.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many leads you have, right? Like, I want you to like sit there for a second. Conversions, that's what's important.
The quality of the leads and the leads that convert into a deal are more important. Like, I'll take 10 leads that are highly motivated and convert versus 1,000 leads that are not interested in selling.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so what we're trying to do is be intelligent about giving somebody the ability to scale up their direct mail, but do it while preserving and maintaining conversion rate.
That's sick.
And that's the key. Yeah. So, when we started talking, Josh, we hadn't kind of dived into some of what we were really doing, but I was saying what it takes is somebody thinking about how do you innovate something that's been around for a long time. And our answer to this innovation was connecting the data and the events and the timelines of data with automated direct mail that changes the messaging based on those things.
That's amazing. That is so sick, dude. And I think that is just going to be so powerful for people. And how long have you guys been testing this?
Yeah, we released it inside of the FreedomSoft CRM about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And so we've been, existing FreedomSoft users have been using it. We send a lot of direct mail.
Yeah.
We recently spun our Mail Now system out as a standalone, so you don't have to use the FreedomSoft CRM. If you want to use our direct mail and data system to drive your lead generation in direct mail and integrate it with whatever CRM you love and are already using, you can use our direct mail system, what we're talking about right here, and with a copy and paste, you can integrate it into whatever CRM.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Yeah, that's going to be extremely valuable for people because some people might just be so driven into what they're currently using, and then being able to plug into the, direct mail, platform that you guys have built out, it's going to be powerful. But obviously, you guys check out FreedomSoft if you haven't already. Tons of highly successful businesses I personally know that are using it. So, Rob, we are at the end of our time, but man, this was fire. I've never heard direct mail explained where it was actually interesting to me. But this is part of like what separates certain businesses from others is if you're able to do the boring stuff and innovate it to become even better. Because like you said, it's worked for 30 plus years. It's stood the test of time. Yeah. It's when text blasting was and cold calling and voicemail, ringless voicemails was really dominating the system for a couple years. And most of that, it's all gone away. Direct mail still stands. It's standing through the ashes of the burnt, remains of what text blasting, cold calling, and ringless voicemails were. And, back when I was running this podcast, in 2020, 2021, that's all we talked about was text blasting and cold calling and very little information was coming out about direct mail because it's been the same thing over and over again for the last 30 years. And like you said, the innovation process of this has been key. And I think that this can really, really put some investors over the top that are currently, if you haven't started direct mail campaigns, obviously this is a good place to start. You're going to have a leg up because you haven't already been driving home these campaigns that were pointless and not specific. But even if you are running direct mail, I think this would be a really good kind of system to integrate with what you're doing because it's just going to take it to the next level.
Well, what I've tried to do, Josh, is I've been doing this stuff for 25 years, and I don't wake up in the morning and say, I wonder how I could buy a house this week. Like, I don't wonder how to do that. I know exactly how to do it. And so for the experienced real estate investor that says, man, that's a different way to think about direct mail, that makes sense. It's easy to plug into their existing systems. For the new person, I can teach somebody all of this stuff, and I can spend all of this time trying to teach them the data and the logic and the system and the process and how to think about all this stuff and coach them to do it. Or I can teach them to push a button and pull a lever inside of our system that has already got all of the 25 years of my brain designed into the technology. They just get to push the button, pull the lever, and it works.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's going to be the smart way to go for everybody. So, Rob, man, this has been an absolute fire episode. There's going to be so much usable content in here. I want to give you the opportunity to, after you've shared all this valuable insights and all these tactics and strategies that we really need to be thinking about when it comes to direct mail. But I want to give you the opportunity to be able to plug FreedomSoft. Talk to us about, like, nobody's familiar with it. What do they do? How can they get a hold of you? How can they use FreedomSoft? But also, I brought this up to you right before we started recording, but you have some content out in the world that you've discontinued, but it's still highly, highly relevant that people really can consume. So Rob has a podcast called The Real Estate Mogul with Rob Swanson that we'll have linked down in the show notes below. You can find that on all podcast platforms. And you can also look for it on YouTube. He's got a lot of really great YouTube content as well. I mean, lots of really, really good stuff. I'm seeing like why direct mail is taking over, and let's see here, 3 steps to, increase your real estate speed the deal, the stuff like that. I think that a lot of this information is going to be really valuable and still relevant to utilize and, go check out. But talk to us about FreedomSoft. How can people connect with you and who can use it and the purposes for it?
Yeah, you got it. We have a flag that we plant at the top of the hill at FreedomSoft, and it says you should organize before you automate, because otherwise you end up automating chaos. And so from a CRM perspective, Josh, we break things into 3 buckets: lead generation, lead management, and lead follow-up. And that's pretty obvious. It's pretty, not rocket science to think about that. But when you start to think about the lead generation tools, strategies, techniques, things you can do, and then in each of those buckets, how they connect and how it takes a prospect through the conversion journey, it makes a huge difference. And so those are the things that we think about from a FreedomSoft perspective, providing tools that work for people to run their business and close more real estate deals. And as I mentioned, somebody that has a CRM that they already love, but listen to what we just talked about on the direct mail side. We've spun out our Mail Now product as a standalone product. So if that's all you want is the data integration with the direct mail sequence, you can plug that right into your existing CRM. So that's us, freedomsoft.com. You can find out all about it.
Amazing. Yes. Again, thank you so much for sharing that, guys. We'll have all of that linked down in the description below so you can go check that out. Rob has a lot of really great, valuable content that's out there that you can consume as well if you want to learn more about it. But Rob, man, thank you so much for hopping on. I definitely look forward to having you back again soon. We'll find another innovative topic that was boring previously, but you've made it interesting. We'll bring you back on to talk about it. So make sure you do some homework and look for something else to talk about.
I got 5 ideas we can talk about right now, Josh.
Amazing. All right, we'll get them scheduled.
Love it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being on. Guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you have not already, make sure you have subscribed to the show. And I have a lot of great content that's going out as well, teaching you guys more about marketing as a real estate investor, but also organic content marketing, whether you're doing podcasting, YouTube, social media, stuff like that. I'm really ramping up the YouTube channel, so make sure you go check that out. All of that's going to be linked down in the description below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you have left a review. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and feedback on the podcast. And if there's any guests, any specific topics that you want us to cover, and I'll make sure I get a guest that plugs into that topic. But thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.
Yeah.